And what I wanted to do, talk a little bit, at least lead off this morning, is to talk a little bit about the Noble Foundation consultation and the rural lifestyle effort. And that's the term that we have coined for these new novice producers. And if I have time, what I'm going to end up with is talk a little bit about a brief study that we conducted, or Clay Wright, who's the manager of our rural lifestyle effort, what he did last summer with a Noble Scholar internship, and trying to quantify better what the novice producer actually knows when they start making their assessment. And then hopefully we can use that information as we go forward and do a better job of meeting their needs there at the foundation. So with that, I'll go ahead and move forward. You know, one of the things that we were fortunate enough there at the foundation for us to be created by a founder whose first mission for establishing the foundation was land conservation. Because as he was an oil man, he toured a lot of the United States, and he had a love for Oklahoma. And what he wanted to do was to help farmers and ranchers and the land to try to heal some of this erosion and heal some of the land from some of the poor management practices that he had observed as a child. So with that in place, what he did, he started a group of, he hired a group of soils people. And these soil scientists would do soil testing, and we'd do that free of charge for our producers. And they would also provide the recommendations on how to help improve the soil. And then they hosted a little garden contest that host a land stewardship contest. And immediately there was a need for more information. And so within a couple of years of being established in 1945, actually by 1950, we actually had some new hires. And these new hires were specialists in soils and crops. And then there became other consulting specialists that were hired that were in livestock arena. And their sole mission was to help farmers and ranchers meet their goals, production goals, keep them on the land. And for the most part, these were people that made their livelihood off these farms and ranches. So that's where we started. Well, as the need grew, as the demand grew, what we found is that the foundation grew to where we had 4 consultation teams made of multidisciplinary specialists in 6 areas of expertise. And this is what some of them were: pasture range, soils and crops, ag economics, wildlife, fisheries, as well as livestock. So, we had these well-rounded teams, and that kind of became the trademark for our consultation effort. All you had to do to get this effort free of charge is to be within that 100-mile radius of Ardmore, or the counties within that. And that's 47 counties, 28 in Oklahoma, 19 in North Texas. And so with that, you'd be able to sign up, be able to get these free services, and we would meet those needs. Our first mission within our consultation program, that within the Ag Division, is primarily one-on-one consultation, whether that be within a team on one or some of the consultants on one. But we also wanted to provide educational needs as well. So we also host events such as workshops, field days, and seminars in order to help complement some of our consultation efforts. Times change. And sometime, I guess back in, is about early 1990s, we at the Noble Foundation kind of went away from the old file cabinet type of keeping records, and we moved into the computer age. And we found that immediately we needed a need that needed to be filled in order to capture and track not only our consultation activity, but mainly to track a little bit more information about our cooperators. So we created an ag database that was specifically used for us. And this has been a very key instrument for what we wanted to do as we begin to see some changes that were occurring in agriculture. And what was happening, as we noted really back in the early 90s, that we were seeing a change in our cooperator base. Instead of being primarily producers and landowners that were interested in trying to make a substantial part of their living off the land, we were seeing people that were, they weren't traditional. What we saw was, that they would have at least one, if not all 3 of these characteristics. They may have small acreages. They lacked agricultural knowledge, although many of them were knowledgeable, educated in other areas. They didn't have the basics in agriculture, and they were more interested in what we call quality of life goals. It wasn't necessarily all about money. So with that, we began to say, well, how do we want to address these, and when they were only coming in about 20 to 30% of the new cooperators on an annual basis, we didn't think too much about it. We just fit them in with our normal workload. Well, Census of Ag information came out in 2007, and we had our ag database information. We thought, well, we better start comparing this, because by this time, by 2007, it was running about 50% or greater were these rural life, these novice type producers that were asking for our services. So we thought we better take a little closer look at it. And if you just look at that 47 county service area, according to the 2007 Census of Ag, this is what it would have looked like. And if it was a state, if those 47 counties were a state, in 2007, we'd have been the 6th or 7th largest beef cattle producing state in the country. So our focus there at the foundation, a lot of our consultation efforts revolved around forage-based beef production and the enterprises that complement that, the land resources that we have there. So we began to look at the census information and compare it to our ag database. And come to find out, we were learning some new information for ourselves, because we really didn't have a feel for the number of cooperators who we were working with relative to those that were available, or what size. And if you look at it, 2%, that's not a whole lot that are signed up as cooperators, but we were working with a lot of the larger producers when it's 10% of the the available farmland. And you can see that based on the cattle, they were some of the larger landowners. But that didn't fit everything. You think about it, just because we have averages, what does average mean? We were at this point in time able to begin to quantify some of the land resources that were out there, relative to what the producers signed up and with what our consultants were verifying when we went out on farm visits. According to their maps, this is about what the land resource looked like relative to those 2% of the producers that we work with, or that 10% of the land base. And we talked about average cooperator. This is what the average cooperator looks like. We get that question quite a bit. Well, what's the average cooperator? This is what they look like, and I haven't seen him. So that's where we be. We can tell you what the upper range is. But even with that, how meaningful is that information? When we really started assessing the Census of Ag information and looking at what information we had on our cooperators, we realized that we had certain counties within the service area where we could see land size, acreage of farms, for our producer was growing, although the numbers of farms were reducing. We looked at it a little bit closer with our own cooperator database, and this is where we found that we had our true commercial producers, typically. If we want to say in general, where do you find them? Those are the counties where they're at. And our consultation effort, where we had a team of consultants, full complement, it really met those resource needs, and we still felt like we were making good use of our time and effort. So as we looked at just the commercial cooperator, what did the commercial cooperator average look like? Well, this is what they look like. Now we're beginning to say, this makes sense. This does typically fit more of our commercial producers. So we're getting a little closer with what we wanted to try to do. But the question in our minds, and the segment that was continuing to grow most rapidly, and by this time it was pushing 70% of our new cooperators, was this rural life segment. And where we found them, and according to the Census of Ag information, was along this I-35 corridor, where we saw farm size shrinking and the numbers of them increasing. And as they were increased, we were getting more and more calls wanting some type of assistance. So we kind of began to look at what did that look like. Well, this is what the average rural life cooperator looked like. And you can see they're quite a bit smaller, but still larger land base than what we actually anticipated. What did they look like? Well, they look like just about anyone else that we'd come into, typically, but not always. These people are very educated. By and large, we've had a larger percentage of them that were technology savvy, and they kind of thought out of the box. They weren't afraid of trying new things. They were looking at opportunities that would avail themselves, not necessarily in the beef industry. So that gave us a new opportunity. So how do we need to address that from a consultation standpoint? Well, that's when we began to decide we probably ought to have a specific effort toward our rural life people. We looked at what were their needs, and their primary need was education. So what we thought was what we needed to create was a basic ag component, because we were still doing educational events for the commercial producer. And what we would find is that these smaller landowners, they weren't bashful to ask questions, and when we would throw out terms like EPDs or BCS body condition scores, they wanted to know what that meant. So we had to step back, humble ourselves a little bit and say, what do these people need, as opposed to what do we think we need to be telling them? And it was a complete change in how we needed to approach it. Well, what we wanted to do is have educational events that were specifically targeted toward this basic ag experience. So we began to set these things up, and the more we worked with it, the more we found out how little we really didn't know. And what we did is we looked internal to the foundation and said, where do we have resources that could help us do a better job of communicating in an educational event setting? And Scott McNeil, the director of our publications and visual media department, our PR director, kind of got together and says, well, we could probably help you if you would like it. We said, well, give us some ideas. They said, well, one of the first things you probably need to do is to quit trying to do it all yourself. And they were right. There's a lot of good information with some of these other ag agencies and other ag resources out there that we need to push them toward. Utilize them, tie the links into our website and say, you need to be checking these others out, but we need to be somewhat knowledgeable of what they're doing. So we saw that the collaborative efforts was a place where we needed to start, and we have. And hopefully we'll continue to build on those relationships into the future. The other thing that we had to do is we better reassess our presentation skills. What do we want to do in order to deliver that message? We all thought we could talk pretty good, and you just saw my language, my English skills isn't as good as I'd like to admit. But what we found out is that we needed to, instead of showing people so much information up on the screen, let's give them a picture and then let's talk about it. To redirect the attention back to the speaker and give them the basic information they needed. So put less on the slide and put more in the conversation, and then allow, and have shorter presentations, like 15 minutes, and then ample time for question and answers, because that's what they really wanted. So we began to practice in front of each other, peers. And so if we were throwing out words and concepts that were probably more than elementary, well then we call each other on the carpet on it. So now we practice our presentations before we present to this audience to make sure we're at the level that we need to be. Okay. The other things that we found that we needed to do, we needed to brand that educational effort. That was another thing that Scott and Adam within our admin department had said, let's start branding who we are. We want this to be separate. We'll call it Basic Ag. Let's brand it. And so we started looking at the materials and information, and you'll see it has Basic Ag on it. That indicates, the targeted audience. We also began to utilize these smaller cards. So y'all saw the examples of it. I think many of these got mailed out. We've used them on our website, and we find that those little cards tell as much information if we want it to, keep it as concise as possible, and be able to deliver it to the people that are out there. So that's been helpful. We try to carry that concept through our Ag News and Views and our other publications that we have that go to all the audience. And probably what's nice is we also have a website that actually tries to incorporate that as well. Now, trying to keep up with this is always a challenge, but hopefully, as we go forward, we'll be able to keep up with it even better. But it's a challenge in order to keep that fresh. We also have an element where our cooperators can log in and take a look at all their information that we've ever worked with them, any plans they might have, any soil test or forage test that they might have, as well as have a dashboard on their computer for any of the key information and sites that they would like to utilize. They can all store it on this one website. So we've tried to utilize some of our IT skills as well. Now, I'm about out of time, but I just wanted to cover just a minute some of the key things that we found out when we started looking at the ability of the novice producers to identify their own needs. If we just took a look at the people that from about summer of 2009 to the summer of 2011, people that have gone through the process, that applied had received a farm visit, received a plan, and had time to implement the plan, we would take a look at what they were able to accomplish as far as or be able to identify what their needs were. Well, we just looked at what this cooperator looked like to date. Remember what the real life cooperator looked like overall. Now look at what they look like in the recent ones, over the last 2 years. Farm size is smaller, number of cows are smaller, and I don't know if anybody has ever seen a third of a bull. Okay? But that's what the average real life cooperator in the recent ones look like. The key thing is 60% of them don't have cattle at all. Wildlife is an interest. Other forms of livestock are an interest. Land stewardship. It's a different audience altogether. But if we went ahead and looked at just 100 of them that have gone through the process, what we want to do is rank their needs by, we have them on their application, rank their needs and what they think they need. Then we go out on the farm to assess it. We let the consultants reassess it. And then we analyze some selected demographics to see if there were some trends in there. And in summary, I just bumped through these right quick. This is some of the selected demographics that we were going to look at. Results were most of these real life producers can accurately identify their needs about 50% of the time. So that shows there is room for improvement. If we looked at their self-assessment, typically what they thought where their needs were with their livestock and with their grasses, pastures. What their needs really went all the way back to the soils and their pastures. That was their greatest need. Males tended to be just a little bit better at it than the females, but not a whole lot different. Age, surprisingly, this younger group, the 25 to 34 age segment, were the most accurate at assessing their needs relative to any other age group that we looked at. Size of ownership, length of ownership, no differences, no correlation. Can't tell anything about that. So that surprised us quite a bit. Time spent on the farm, principal occupation ag, slight differences, numeric, that's it. So the bottom line is we have these novice producers that are making up a growing segment. They lack the ability to identify their own primary needs. And we're seeking, that's why we're here, is some of these innovative means for assessing and providing information to them. Because if they have that need, we need to have a better way of delivering it. So with that, that's the end of my little component. It tells us a little bit about what we know and kind of where we are to date. We don't have all the solutions. We're just we're seeking answers. Thank you.